Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to see an interesting Azure use case. The use case is add additional audit columns to the target tables. You have a source file cars.csv which has three columns: number, company name, and the car model. And your objective is to load this data to Azure SQL database. While loading the data from CSV file to Azure SQL database table, we are adding 4 additional columns for our auditing purpose. The first column, file name, contains the file name from which we loaded the data. In our case, the file name is cars.csv. The second column is source details. In this column, I have printed the static data as car info. The third column is the pipeline run ID, which contains the pipeline run ID information. The fourth column is run date time, which contains the date and time on which the data got loaded. These additional columns help us to track the data in case of any data issues in the future. I hope the use case is clear. Now let's get into the implementation. Here is our Azure homepage. I have uploaded the source file in Azure Tutorials storage account. Let me get into the storage account, Azure Tutorials. Inside that, I'm going to the container. The container name is tutorial files. Inside the container, I have the source file cars.csv. Let's get into the file. Let's preview the data. We have 3 columns: number, company name, and the car model. We are going to load this data to a table in SQL database along with the audit columns. Here is our SQL database. Let's see our SQL database. Right now, we don't have any tables. Let's create the pipeline to load the data. For creating the pipeline, I'm using Azure Synapse Analytics. Here is the Azure Synapse Analytics homepage. I'm going to create a new pipeline. The pipeline name is PL Demo. In order to load the data, I am going to use the copy data activity. First, let's provide the source details. Let me get into the source settings. I'm going to create a new data set for the source. Let me click New. Our source data is in Azure Blob Storage. And the file format is CSV file. I'm going to mention the source dataset name as DS source. Next, we have to create a new linked service. Let me name my linked service as LS source. And select my Azure subscription and the storage account name. Let me test my connection. The connection is successful. Now let me create the linked service. The linked service is successfully created. Now let's select the source file. The container name is tutorial files. Inside that, we are going to use cars.csv. Let me click OK. We have provided the source settings. We have few additional source settings that needs to be done that we will get back later. Now let's go to the sync settings. In other words, target settings. Let me go to sync and create a new data set for the sync. Our target is Azure SQL database. Let's select that. SQL database and click Continue. I'm going to mention the dataset name as DS Target. For the target, I'm going to create a new linked service. My linked service name is LS Target and select my Azure subscription and select the server name and the database name and provide my username and password. Let me test my connection. The connection is successful. Now let me create the linked service. The linked service is successfully created. We don't have any pre-existing table in the target. So I'm going to enter the table name, enter manually, provide the schema name as DBO and the target table name as car details. Since the table is not created yet, we don't have any schema to import, so I'm going to click None. Let's click OK. We are going to create the table on the fly while the pipeline execution is in progress. So I'm going to click Auto Create Table. Now let's go back to the source setting again. We have a setting called Additional Columns in the source. I'm going to add additional columns. The first column name is the file name. We'll get the file name from the file path variable. In the next column, we are going to enter the static information. Let me click New and add the column as file name description. Here we are going to add the static value. Let me click Custom. I'm going to mention car info. Next, I'm going to add the pipeline run ID. Pipeline run ID. For providing the pipeline run ID, we have to select Add Dynamic Content, and from the system variables, we can select the pipeline run ID. Let me click OK. The last column is the load timestamp. Let me add a new column, and the column name is load timestamp. Here I'm going to add the current time. Let me select Add Dynamic Content, and from the functions, date functions, we can select UTC now. Let me click OK. All 4 additional columns are created and the sync settings are also completed. We are good to run our pipeline. Let me click Debug. The pipeline is running. The execution is successfully completed. Now let's go to the SQL database. Let me refresh. In the tables, we have the table successfully created. Let me query the table. The table is successfully created with all 4 audit columns. The file name column has the file name. The file description has the information about the file. We have the pipeline run ID and the date and time in which the pipeline was executed. We can use these audit columns for our future tracking. I hope this tutorial was useful and I'm sure that you learned something new today. If you do like this video, please consider to subscribe and I will see you in yet another interesting Azure use case. Thank you.